Welcome to our Crossing Archive. My name is Joey Harris, and I'm the online minister here at The Crossing. Here's where you can find all of our full services from our Crossing online experience. We are in our series called No Easy Jesus. This week, Jerry Harris, our senior pastor, is bringing us the word. But before we get into the sermon, we've got some incredible worship for you. Thanks for watching.
I'm tethered to. With every step, I collide with you. Like a tidal wave, rushing over me, rushing into me. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You cannot fake the only thing I found is through it all. You never let me down. You don't hold back, relentless in pursuit. At every turn, I come face to face with you. Like a tidal wave, rushing over me, rushing into me. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. You surround me, chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? You chase me down, you seek me out. How could I be lost when you have called me found? Like a tidal wave, rushing over me, rushing in to meet me here. Your love is fierce, like a hurricane that I can't escape, tearing through the atmosphere. Your love is fierce. Your love is fierce. You never let go. Your love is fierce. Even now you surround me. Your love is fierce. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Your love is fierce. Oh, I want something just like this. Oh, I want something just like this. Oh, I want something just like this.
Well, good evening, Crossing Church. How are you doing? It's finding is this great to be in this place, to be with each other. I want to welcome all of our campuses that are joining with us. So we have the opportunity to join with you. If you're online, inside.tv, what a blessing just to be able to be together and to serve the Lord together and to worship the Lord together, to be able to have that time of community. And I want to just say happy Mother's Day weekend to all the mothers. Come on, let's give them a hand. You're awesome. You have, I just wish right now I could get on the phone and call my mom, but I'd have to call heaven. And I miss her terribly, but what a great example she was to me. We are just so glad that you're here. And this is also baby dedication weekend, so you're going to get the cute factor is going to be happening here in a little while, and that's just going to make it
worth coming. Anyway, we've been in a series called No Easy Jesus, and it's based on a book by a guy named Jason Mitchell, who has been one of the ministers at LCBC Church in Philadelphia. LCBC stands for Lives Changed by Christ. It's a church of 16,000 people, has 10 locations, and they actually came here because they wanted to see how we did our locations across these states so that they could implement some of our ideas. And this next week, all of our campus pastors and executive team are going to go to their location and learn from them. And that's pretty awesome when you can do that. We know when they can come and learn from us and we can learn from them, and everybody gets better at what they're doing. So with that in mind, next week is going to be a pretty special week because the guy who wrote the book, No Easy Jesus, is going to be here, and he's going to speak to all of you at all of our locations. And you'll have an opportunity to hear his heart, like some of the reasons he wrote what he wrote in that book, and you don't want to miss that. So I want to give that little plug for Jason. And today is a special day. It's a day when we remember mothers and motherhood and the heart, really, of nurturing and love. And, of course, I've experienced that in my home. I have a great wife that's an awesome mom, and now she's a grandma, and that's awesome as well. But it recalls in my mind a story that happened a number of years ago when I just had 2 of my 4 kids, and Jessie, my oldest daughter, she had just been born, and I went on my first trip to Haiti. And it was my first mission trip, short-term mission trip that I'd ever been on. And Allison said, if you get an opportunity, just bring one of those babies home. If you see one of those babies, just bring them home, and we'll just love that little child, and I just ha, whatever. And for 2 weeks, we did ministry, we built buildings, we ministered to people in St. Louis du Nord, Haiti. And on the last day that I was there was a woman that came into the compound where we were with a brand new newborn baby. And this brand new baby had a medical infirmity called a prolapsed rectum. It's something that if it were to happen in the United States, it's a simple surgery. But in northern Haiti, it's a completely different matter. The mother died in childbirth. They didn't know who the father was. This was the aunt that brought the baby into the compound. And she wanted to know if there was anything that we could do. And a group of doctors, of course, there we had enough to do a medical clinic, but not a major surgery. And so they heard about a Baptist hospital that was about 30 miles away, which was about an hour and a half drive by Haitian roads. And maybe, possibly, they would be able to do it. At the time, there was no way to communicate with that hospital, so we just had to get in the car and head down the road. And they asked me to go along, and so I was in the back seat with a couple of nurses, doctors in the front, and this woman holding the baby. I remember that one of the nurses got out a piece of candy, a particular kind of candy. It was a root beer barrel. Does anybody know what a root beer barrel is? Yeah. And it was interesting. The nurse handed it to the lady holding the baby in the back, and she carefully unwrapped it and nursed the malnourished child with that root beer barrel. And to me, that just hit me. I don't know if that would hit you, but that just hit me when I saw that. And of course, my wife's words. And I'm looking at this little baby. We finally made it down to this hospital in La Pointe, was the name of the town. The doctors took the baby in, and after a little while, the baby came back out, and we were told there was nothing that they could do. They did not have the facility or the ability to be able to do any kind of corrective surgery. Now, I want you to know what that meant. It meant that that baby was going to die. And there was nothing anybody could do about it. It was my last day there. So you know what I'm thinking. Just give me the baby. Just give me the baby. and I'll take that baby to America. And I'll take responsibility for that little child. And that little child, as a little boy, he'll have that surgery, and he'll recover just fine. And he could be almost anything he wanted to be. And we would see to that. But the rules and the laws and the politics and the government would not allow that happen. And I remember the long drive back in the back seat, sitting next to that woman holding a baby, and my heart breaking, just breaking. And I remember when they got out of the car and they walked down that dirt path, that was going to be it. And there was nothing I could do. That is not a pleasant story. But it's a story that helps you to understand this concept of compassion. What I was feeling in that moment was compassion. I wanted to have some skin in the game. I wanted to get in there. I wanted to do something. I wanted to make a difference. And do you know what that moment taught me, is that compassion is not something that ever happens at a distance. Wouldn't you say that's true? That compassion is something that happens when it's up close and personal. It happens when you're actually interacting with a circumstance or a situation, when it appeals to your senses, like your sense of sight, when you see it, or when you hear it, or smell it, or taste it, or touch it. It happens all up close. That's where compassion actually happens. And it's so different, you know. It's not like there's an off switch. It's not like there's the remote control. When you see one of those commercials on TV and it's like, you know, you're seeing this thing and it's like, I can just change channels, right? I can just move out of that. I don't have to watch it. I don't have to see it. But when you're in the environment of it, it is completely different. And when I look at Jesus' life in the New Testament and his ministry, I see that he is constantly in a position of compassion, constantly. Let's just take 3 examples, okay? There's going to be so many of these examples, but I just want to take 3 really quick. And this one's in Matthew 20. It says, Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, and a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd rebuked them and told them to be quiet. But they shouted all the louder, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." And Jesus stopped and called them. "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. "Lord," they answered, "we want our sight." Look at the next words. Jesus had compassion on them. You see, it was happening in proximity. He heard them. He saw them. And he touched their eyes. I mean, it wasn't like he healed them from a distance. He literally touched their eyes. And immediately they received their sight and followed him. What do I see in this biblical story, this quick little snapshot? What I see is Jesus is in proximity with somebody who is in need. And what it does is it moves him to compassion, and he intervenes in that situation. Let's look at another one, okay? This is in Mark chapter 1. It says, a man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you're willing, you can make me clean." And filled with compassion, you see, he's on his knees, he's in front of Jesus, it's happening right in front of him. Jesus is filled with compassion. He says he reached out his hand and he touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. Let's look at one more, okay? It's in Luke chapter 7. It says, as he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother. And she was a widow. You can see where that compassion would come from. Only son. He's dead. She doesn't have her husband anymore. She's alone. Now she doesn't have her son either. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her. He was moved with compassion. and he said, don't cry. You know the rest of the story? He touched the pallet that they were carrying his body on, and he sat up, and he gave the son back to the mother. Jesus being moved with compassion. Now, there's a number of us at all of our locations that at one time or another you've gone on a short-term mission trip. If you go on a mission trip, whether it's to Love the Lou down in St. Louis, or if it's to Haiti, or if it's to Ecuador, or if it's to Africa, if it's to Uganda, if it's to India, what's going to happen is that you're going to get up close and personal with these kinds of situations. And there are going to be feelings that are not going to just come to you. They are going to overwhelm you, right? Because when you see those things, when they appeal to your senses, you just can't get them out of your head. You can't unsee them. On that same trip that the last day I was in the car with that little boy and the aunt, actually it was the day before that. I was with one of my best friends. He was an elder at the church in Rochdale named Jim. And they wanted to celebrate we had been there for a little over 2 weeks. We built a lot of stuff. And so they killed a goat. And they roasted that goat, and they had beans and rice, and they had fresh fruit, and we had eaten very little during that 2 weeks, and so this was like a big feast, and everybody was excited about partaking in this meal, having this meal, and there was no place to sit. You could just stand, and Jim was standing there, and he had this paper plate, and there was this little Haitian boy that came up next to Jim, and he's got his plastic fork and this wonderful plate of food, and he starts to dig in, and this Haitian boy, this little boy, is just looking up at him like. And I was just watching this. And so Jim looks down at his plate of food, and he looks at the little boy, he looks at the plate of food. He looks at the little boy. You know what happens, don't you? What'd he do? Here. He just handed that plate of food to that little boy. The thing that was powerful to me wasn't that he gave the plate of food away. He watched this little boy eat and how he ate and wept. I just watched this elder just bawl his eyes out. Because he was moved. He was moved with compassion. Why? Why is that? Why does that happen to us? It's because something happens when we interact with people or situations that are close in proximity to us. Something just fires off inside of us. There's like this response, isn't that right? We have this response, and it happens. It doesn't kind of happen here, and it really doesn't happen here. Where does it happen? Everybody point to where it happens. It happens down here. You think it happens up here? It happens down here. It really does, because, and I'm going to explain that in a little bit, because in the Greek language, there's actually a word for this. It's a pretty awesome word, okay? You're going to learn a Greek word today, and this is what it is. It's this word. S-P-L-A-N X-N-A. How do you say that word? Just give it a try. This is how you say it. Splachna. Splachna. Now I want everybody to give it your very best. All of our locations, you ready? 1, 2, 3. Splachna. Oh, come on, you can do louder than that. Better. Come on. Ready? You'll feel better. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Splachna. Now apologize to the person in front of you and wipe that off of the back of their head. Splachna. What a word. A Greek word that talks about the seat of your emotions. It means your inward parts, but more specifically, where the heart and the mind meet But the Greeks believed it happened in a particular place inside of you, your bowels. Your bowels? Yeah. This place deep inside of us. It's the place where you feel things the strongest. Listen, it's where an emotional response becomes a physical response. Now, I know a lot of you wanted to say heart, right? Because that's kind of an American, an English idea, the heart. But when we say splachna, we're talking about, have you ever felt something emotional so deeply that you have this physical reaction to it where it nearly makes you sick or it gives you butterflies? Have you ever heard of that? Like butterflies in your stomach, right? Because it's a deep feeling, a deep emotion, whether it's one of joy or love, or whether it's one of hurt and pain, or specifically this one, compassion. It has an effect on us. Now, because of that, guess what we do? We like to keep compassion at a distance. Or is that just me? Is that just me? I think that a lot of us tend to do that. We want to kind of keep it at a distance. And this would be the easy Jesus version of life, right? Because if we have compassion, what's going to happen? I mean, think about the investment. Think about the follow through. Think about what's going to happen if I choose to have compassion in a situation. I think a lot of us would say, you know, I'm just more comfortable asking God to comfort others than having Him ask me to do it. I would just rather pray about that, you know, God, help all the people that are hurting rather than me do it. And if I'm being honest, a lot of times, most days maybe, I would rather that God would get tears and mascara on His shirt than me on mine. See, an easy Jesus wants Jesus to hear our prayers if people are hurting or grieving, but we want to keep going about our business, and He can mess with that. He can deal with that. Is that true? Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 1 says, "Again I looked, and I saw the oppression that was taking place under the sun. And I saw the tears of the oppressed." I saw them. See that? I saw the tears of the oppressed. "And they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter." You know, it's easy for us to have opinions about things like immigration. It's easy for us to have political opinions, right? But when you see someone or a family and they're hurting, all that stuff goes out the window, right? Because all of a sudden, what have you engaged? You've engaged compassion. And as a matter of fact, you've actually engaged the real Jesus, not the easy Jesus. See, the real Jesus, He messes with your heart. He asks us to act on the compassion that we're feeling that's welling up inside of us. You see, true compassion layers actions into our feelings. It moves us to actually do something. And the Bible says that Jesus, in these situations, that's what happened to Him. He was moved. He was moved to compassion. And it takes a lot of courage to put yourself in a situation or multiple situations that'll do that to you, that will move you to compassion. Isn't that right? And please, don't misunderstand me. I think just about everybody, unless you're some kind of living heart donor, okay? I think just about everyone will respond with compassion if you are suddenly confronted with it. And I'm not really talking about that. If there's a situation that you're not expecting that comes in front of you, I think it's a natural human response to feel compassion and then be moved to actually do something. That's really not what I'm talking about, okay? Because I think there is that kind of compassion in pretty much all of us. What I'm talking about is actually looking for situations that require compassion. And I think that's what a compassionate person is. A compassionate person is somebody who's looking for an opportunity to do something compassionate. How do you rate in that world? When the Bible says that Jesus had to go through Samaria, and that's where he meets the woman at the well, he didn't have to go through Samaria, but he lived his life in an intentional way so he would be in those circumstances. When Jesus goes to the pool of Bethesda or the pool of Siloam and he heals people there, I mean, he's going to see people that are in those kinds of situations that require some healing or require something. He's putting himself intentionally in these positions. So Jesus wasn't just someone who was moved with compassion. He was a compassionate person. This is a no easy Jesus kind of faith is what I'm talking about. So if I want to be that, and maybe you don't. I mean, maybe you would just rather deal with your own problems and not mess with others. But if you want to have a no easy Jesus kind of Jesus, then you're going to have to look like he looked for those opportunities. And I just want to give you 6 things to think about, all right? Just 6 things to think about. Here's number 1. If you want to be a compassionate person the way that Jesus defines it, first thing you're going to have to do is slow down. You got to slow down. I hate that one. How many of you hate that one? I mean, yeah, some of you are like, yeah, I just take it easy anyway, I'm good. But there's some of you that don't like slowing down. You've got an agenda, you got things to do, you have only so much time, you're at a very hurried pace, there are a lot of important things, and it's hard to take time to notice. In order to be a compassionate person, you have to slow down. Are you willing to do that? You know, if Jesus would have just sped up, he could have healed a lot more people. But you don't see him doing that. He slowed down. And I think there are times in our lives we just got to take a breath. Say, Jesus, I want you to shine out of me, and I need to slow down. Number 2, you're going to need to make space in your life for interruption. Maybe you're not someone who goes really fast, but maybe you're a person who doesn't multitask. Maybe you're a person who can only do one thing at a time. You really don't want to be distracted by anything else. You don't like interruptions, right? Well, a compassionate person creates space in their lives in order to be interrupted. And I'll tell you why. Because people's needs and the situations of their lives are inconvenient, right? And if they're inconvenient for the ones that are actually experiencing, they're going to be inconvenient for you. And so you have to prepare yourself for that. This is probably the strongest one, okay, number 3, and that is this. Expect a mess. A compassionate person injects themselves into a mess. Prepare to have your life wrecked. And maybe that's why we want to avoid it, because we don't want to have our lives wrecked, right? Because when we get involved with situations like that, it exposes us to the messiness of other people's lives. And we're probably thinking, you know what? I have plenty of messiness in my life. I really don't need to be pulling in the messiness of somebody else's life. But when we do that, we're not a compassionate person. We're not reflecting Jesus the way that we should, because people have stuff in their lives, addictions and divorces and trauma and depression and all kinds of other things. You can just name them. And when we inject ourselves in those, it's messy. If we like all our lives stable and perfect and balanced, there's no way that we're going to be compassionate. Those two things just don't interact. You need to expect a mess. Number 4, don't pick winners and losers. I see people that other people would qualify as compassionate people, but they are only selectively compassionate. Like they're compassionate to the people they want to be compassionate to. Have you ever seen those? You hear what I'm saying? And my heart just goes out to this person because that's convenient and comfortable for me. In some ways, that's kind of posing. That's not like the real deal. Because the real deal is not picking winners and losers. The real deal when it comes to compassion is that it's whoever God puts in your path, whatever the situation is. We don't pick winners and losers. Now, with all that being said on this side, I need to say something on this side, and that is watch your emotional tank. If you're going to want to be, and some of you are just great at this, but if you want to be a compassionate person, you need to watch the emotional tank. Let me tell you what I mean by that. A lot of people think that if I'm like physically fit and I'm in my Bible and I'm, like I'm reading and I'm praying and I'm stuff, then I'm good. Like there's 2 gauges on the dashboard of my life. But there's actually this great big gauge in the middle of the dashboard of your life that a lot of times people don't even look at, and it's the emotional gauge. You see, every time we inject ourselves into the mess of other people and we're compassionate with them, we match emotions with them. We feel their pain, right? Jesus, when we're moved, like Jesus was moved, and we match those emotions, it burns something inside of us, like gasoline. It burns energy inside of us. And so the emotional tank, like a gas tank, it starts to go down. And let me tell you something, you're not going to be any good to anybody if you let that tank go down to nothing, if you let that tank get empty, because that makes you vulnerable to areas in your life that'll take you down the road of a mess. So you have to watch that close while you're doing that. Watch the tank, watch the emotional tank, because you always want to operate from a position of strength. You can't be any good for anybody else if you're no good for yourself, right? So watch the emotional tank, all right? I know that's kind of on the other side of the equation. Number 6, you're not Jesus, okay? So compassion does not restore people. Jesus restores people. You hear me? A lot of times we get a Messiah complex. We start thinking, "Oh, that's me. I'm the Savior." No, you're not. He is. Compassion doesn't restore. Jesus restores. Jesus does. So point people to Jesus. That's the most important thing that you can do as you're showing compassion. I want to close with this. The greatest compassion that the world ever saw happened in one place, happened 2,000 years ago in Jerusalem. It was when Jesus was bleeding and sweating and dying on a cross. What you saw there is absolute perfection of compassion. And you know what? When we think about that, we think about the pain that he endured. We think about how his life was wrecked so that we could have hope, right? And we think, what could be worse? What could have been worse than what Jesus went through? I want to share one more word with you before I close. It's this word. This is a Greek word for compassion. Here's another one. Now, that word has the same kind of sound in it. It's the word racham. Everybody say that. Racham. One more time. Racham. Compassion in Hebrew. But it doesn't mean the bowels. It doesn't mean the gut. It means the womb. It's a feminine word. Now, I want you to think of that picture of Jesus dying on the cross. Who's there? Who's in that scene? His mother. His mother is in that scene. So we think about the pain that he endured. Just for a moment, think about the pain she endured. Let me ask you a question. Would Mary have taken his place? I see a lot of mothers going, yeah. I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe you know it better than I do. But I think there's a good indication that she might have been willing to take all of that pain on herself. But you know what? It wouldn't have mattered. if she could have taken his place, the compassion you needed would have never been delivered to you, because there was only one person who had the kind of compassion that we needed to save us from our sins, to take away your sin and mine. And that was the compassion that Jesus has. I need his compassion, and so does everybody else. And so if I'm looking for the compassion of Jesus to save me, to heal me, to give me hope, to change the direction of my life, then I have to be a person who says, Jesus, let your compassion flow through me. We're moving to a time of decision. Amen.
This is one of those sermons that when you hear it, you are immediately presented with a choice. Do you actually listen to what you just heard? Or do you check your Jesus box for the day and you go about your business? You see, compassion is what most people think that they have, but in reality, it's what this world is deprived of most. What happens is the world dilutes true compassion. It twists your logic and your process and says that compassion is a feeling, when God says it's an action. The world says pity is the same thing as compassion, but it isn't. So let's set the record straight. Tweeting about how you think the lifestyle of the inner city is wrong isn't compassion. Sharing a story on your Facebook wall about the abuse of animals isn't compassion. Sending $5 to a GoFundMe for someone in need of cash isn't compassion. A compassionate person's hands are dirty, they're scarred, and they're heavy because they carry the weight of the individual. A compassionate person doesn't tweet about the inner city, but goes into the inner city and does something about it. A compassionate person doesn't share a story on Facebook about the abuse of animals, but goes and volunteers at the animal shelter. A compassionate person doesn't send money. Instead, they go and spend time with the person and walk with them through the hard moment in their life. So what does that mean for you? It means don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Walk in the footsteps of Jesus Christ and get your hands dirty. Feel the weight of others like Jesus felt the weight of your sin on the cross. The world doesn't need more pity, it needs more compassion. So right now, no matter where you're at, take action. Take the next step in your faith. Don't wait for the situation to present itself. Go and find it. Get your hands dirty and watch Jesus change the world through it. Let's go to him right now.
Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my soul. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my soul. 'Cause you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh, you are good, good. Oh. And let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my soul. And let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my soul. 'Cause you are good, good. You are good, good. Oh, 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 you are good, good.
to come. Bearing all our burdens, we are safe in your arms. Broken chains are falling to our feet. Grace and streams of mercy covering. Every guilt and shame are washed away in you now. depths of your love. We're undone by the depths of your love. Oh, we're undone by the depths of your love.
Compassion is what Jesus felt when he died on a cross for your sin. It's what he felt when he was in the upper room with his disciples before he was taken. He wanted them to feel that even though he would be gone physically, he would always be with them inside their hearts. So he took a piece of bread and a cup of wine. He called it his body and his blood and gave it to them as a reminder of his sacrifice. We take time every week in reflection of that sacrifice, of that compassion that Jesus had for us. So whether you've got anything with you or not, together as one church, let's spend time examining our hearts and celebrating what Jesus did for us. Let's go to him right now. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed our service. You can join us live at thecrossing.tv on Thursdays at 6 p.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. on the Central Time Zone. If any questions, you can always contact me at joeyh@thecrossing.net. Once again, thanks for watching.